Hey guys, I am here with Kevtris, Kevin Horton. How's it going, man?
Hey,
It's
going
very good
good.
to have you back on again. I'm very excited to talk to you about a lot of the stuff because the Super Nintendo, man, that's my favorite system.
Well,
So
it's kind of my favorite system now after working on this.
the last time I talked to you was right after the Analog NT Mini was released. And we talked a lot about the different cores and all the other stuff that you'd put into that, as well as some of the testing that I'd done because I'm a little, I don't know if there's even a nice way to put it. I'm very anal about my video games. I don't like things to
Yeah.
be different than the way that they were originally done. And I couldn't find a single thing that was different when playing against like an RGB modded NES or something like that. So I don't know. This is exciting stuff here. So I guess right after that, I'm assuming you probably went right into development with the Super Nintendo. Is that about
Yeah,
right?
that's about right. Yeah.
So it's, I mean, geez, it's a little less than a year, I guess, right?
Yeah, for just this part of it. Yeah. So, everything's been in progress since the mini days, but the bulk of the work was done, pretty much this year.
So how do you even go about doing something like this? Like, what is your first step? Obviously, other than grab a Super Nintendo and plug it in.
Yeah. Well, this time I did stuff a lot different than the way I usually do it. I actually created extra hardware for this. And the hardware was taking the Super Nintendo chips off a board and putting them on a new board and then plugging them into an FPGA. Then I could do direct comparison between the real hardware and my FPGA hardware. And
Oh wow,
I could run it, thousands or millions and billions of cycles and see if it was exactly the same.
that's
So
pretty cool. I was always wondering how cycling and longevity tests work in different environments because I have a development background too, nowhere near like yours, more of just like a hands-on type of thing. But a lot of the longevity testing we did was like subjecting things to extreme circumstances like high temperatures, but we had no way of really testing, what it's going to be like after, because with computer hardware for us, you can't really test after 10 years of cycling on and off and
yeah.
stuff. So that's part of the process, I'm assuming too, is when you run it through these things, like the old, for all of us old guys, the Pentium chips where they would fail after like the 100,000th decimal place in a mathematical equation. Is that pretty much the same type of thing? You put these chips on and run them through all of the tests to kind of run through those?
Well, like for the CPU, I started with the CPU, of course, because that's like the first, I don't know, that's the first natural place I thought to start because, the CPU runs everything. So if the CPU doesn't work, nothing works. So I took a actual 65-816 out of an Apple II GS, put it on a cartridge board, plugged it into the NT Mini, and used the NT Mini to develop it.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
So what I did is I hooked up the 65-816. I implemented my own using the data sheet and traces from the real chip using the FPGA as a logic analyzer. And
Hmm.
then what I did is I got them in lockstep. So my CPU and the 65-816 were running in parallel, running the same code. And then I could compare the outputs directly as it ran in real time.
Huh. Jeez.
So
And how long did just the CPU take?
about a month. That was a long time for a CPU. My first 6502, I think, took 2 or 3 months, but after that, it gets faster and faster and faster. So a typical CPU may only take, a couple days to a week, but this took at least a month or a month and a half. It took a long time.
Jeez, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And
And
then,
so,
go ahead. Sorry.
and then, so what I did is I wrote some code, to do initial testing, make sure the instructions, mostly worked. And then I started doing interrupts. And then what I did is I wrote a thing in Verilog that would feed it random instructions, random data, and random interrupts all at the same time. So, if my thing in the 65-816 stayed in perfect sync over time, that means they were exactly the same.
Hmm. Jeez. So, after you finish the CPU, one of the things I've been wondering since day one, and I didn't like I didn't want to bug you at all, but so all these questions are still running to my mind. How did you decide where to start between the two chip and the one chip consoles? How did you approach the whole video chip of part of this because of such the wide differences between the different models?
I just used the original two chip model.
Hmm.
So I bought four of them off of eBay. I bought Super Famicoms. They're $9 each, so they're pretty cheap.
Hmm.
And when I got them, the plastic was all broken because the guy just put a single piece of bubble wrap and threaded it between the four systems and threw it in the box. But
Lovely.
I didn't care. They all four of them did work, so I knew I was starting with a working. They're all yellowed and stuff, so they're not very good quality systems, but they worked great for this. They're not something you put on the shelf, and
Hmm.
they were very cheap. I was going to buy U.S. systems. They're like $60 at least for a working SNES.
Yeah, and if you wanted the one chip models, they go even higher. And I've seen stores selling the mini for over $100 now, totally stock. Just
Yeah,
the mini with controllers, which is outrageous. So yeah, it's a lot more expensive here.
yeah. The one chip I have one, but I wasn't going to use it because on the PPU I want all those signals because I watched all of those signals so I could see what it was doing inside,
Hmm.
and I used the same method with the comparing to make sure I had it. And what I was doing, I was actually running games on the real PPU and my FPGA PPU at the same time, and you could do a direct compare between the two.
Oh wow! I'm assuming you built all your custom hardware to make that happen as well, right?
Yes, uh-huh.
That's crazy. So, or were you able to get rid of some of the weird blurring and filtering that Nintendo, somehow included in the two chip design?
Well, it's all digital, so there's none of that.
What I wanted to hear, my friend. That's awesome.
Yeah, I did some investigation. It looks like there was three revs of the PPU2, which is what outputs video. I suspect it's because the video output was pretty bad, so I think they kept trying to improve it over time, and it's still not the best. I have my theories why. I'm not 100% sure. I have to get a decap done. I was kind of trying to get a decap done. I couldn't get it done. There's some issues with that.
How would one even go about getting something decapped?
Oh, I know some people that do it.
Oh, well, that helps.
Yeah. So, I mean, it wouldn't have really helped me a huge amount. People think a decap is magic. It isn't. If I decapped it, you get this chip and it's giant. There's, thousands and thousands of gates on there and, probably, tens of thousands of transistors. And, I don't have time to do all of that. It's easier to do a black box reverse engineer, which is what I did.
Hmm. So, was it the same approach with the audio? Because there was at least three different audio revisions, right?
Well, I did the audio a while back, so I used that, but there was a lot of bugs I found, so I fixed all of the bugs. So, I mean, there's like some really hard games that stream audio to it as it plays. Earthworm Jim 2, Clay Fighter, and Tales of Fantasia all stream audio directly to the APU SPC as it plays, and it's very, very timing sensitive.
Hmm. So, is
So.
that something like the Super Game Boy that generates its own audio through the analog pins, or is that different?
No, no, it's all digital. No, it uses like Earthworm Jim uses HDMAs to send data in real time. It sends it in like chunks and it plays one chunk and it's buffering the next.
Hmm.
So it has like three chunks. So it's playing one, buffering two, and there's enough HDMA time during the screen to transfer the next block before it plays it.
That's actually a pretty ingenious way of doing it to make sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, so most of them, all three of those games work that way, but it's a different driver. So, you get one working and the other ones may not work yet. So there was some playing around with that, but I did get all of those working. So I've tested every game pretty much. I've played most of them at least a little bit. Everything works.
so of course, the first questions on a lot of people's mind were, does this work with FX games?
Of course, yes, it does.
Awesome. Was it hard to try to make that happen, or was it just
Yeah,
Jones that Doom with the red
he
cartridge?
felt red.
Yep.
So Yeah, Yoshi's Island was the first Super Effects game I got it playing.
Hmm.
Best Super Effects game, I think.
Yeah, it's
So
a great game.
Star
I am a fan of the original Star Fox too. I don't know why. It just always maybe I was just so fascinated with the polygons as a kid that I love it, but I still think it's a pretty decent game.
Yeah, I never had it back in the day. I actually didn't have any Super Effects game back in the day.
Hmm.
So, I got Yoshi's Island a while back, so I've played that quite a bit.
So I believe it said on the listing that the Super Game Boy was confirmed working as well, correct?
Yep, even the Super Game Boy too.
I was going to be my next question. So the clock speed of the Super Game Boy won't interfere with the FPGA SNES at all, then just reads.
Oh no, it worked. The cartridge port on the Super NT is exactly the same as on a regular Super Nintendo. All the signals are there and everything.
That's awesome. And I believe you said you tested with the SD to SNES, right?
Oh yeah, I developed with it.
Oh, that's awesome. So that definitely guarantees that works.
Yeah, yeah. I developed with this. This thing was pretty awesome for development. And yes, it does work with the Super EverDrive.
Cool.
I had a lot of problems with the Super EverDrive, and it's this cartridge. I don't know if there's something wrong with it, but it did the exact same thing on my reel at Super Nintendo too. So I know it's not anything I was doing, but the SD card would just not work on it for a while. I used it about 10 times, and then the SD card just quit working. It would say SD card error. It'd boot up, show the directory, and when you go to load a game, it would erase it, and then when it was going to load it, it would just die, for lack of a better term. But then after a week or two, then it just worked fine, and it still works. So I don't know.
I have had that issue with EverDrives, but all I do is take it out, take the SD card out, put everything back in, and it seems to fix it. And it doesn't die even mid-game. It just,
Yeah, exactly. It's always like loading or whatever. So in any event, yes, it does work. This is the version with the DSP.
Oh, cool.
So I bought these from that Stone Age Gamer just to make sure it worked. I was gonna get a Super Power Pack, but I couldn't find one on eBay, so I'm sure it works.
So did you have a chance to test the MSU1 audio games as well?
No, but I'm sure it'll work. I mean, audio works, like on the Super Game Boy. So I was gonna test it. I just haven't done it yet. I don't know where to find those games. I gotta poke around. I haven't had time to do it.
Oh, you should have just instant messaged me. I'll just send one over to you.
But yeah, I'm sure it works. So, but I mean, I have I made sure the Super Game Boy works. I mean, I have all three of them right here.
Yeah, and that's basically the same thing because it pumps the audio down the same pins.
Yeah.
So
I got the Japanese one, the US one, and of course, then I got the two. I mean, it's all the same thing.
So I have the digital audio mod installed into my Super Nintendos, and I definitely hear a difference because there's no analog hum on the line at all. So it definitely sounds better, at least to my ears. On the Super NT, I'm assuming that would mean that all of the audio that was in the FPGA is generated digitally, and the only analog to digital audio would be whatever's through those pins. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
All right, so basically you'll still get that same really high quality audio as if you had the digital mod. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I got an option to adjust the volume on the cartridge audio, so you can mute it if you want, or change the level. On the Super Nintendo is fixed, but on this I'm going to let you select the level you want.
Gotcha. That'll actually be helpful for some of the MSU audio games because there was different revisions of the SD to SNES with different ways that it processed the audio. So that'll actually be a big help for all of those. Yeah,
that's what I heard. Some people are complaining it was like super loud.
Only if you use older patched games with the newest revision, or if you put the audio mod onto it. So yeah, I mean it's situational, but that's awesome that there's even that option.
Yeah, so I figured it would be nice to do that. That way people can, if they don't want the audio or they want it a lot quieter or louder, they can just move the slider and set it.
So I'm assuming that it plays PAL games as well. I don't remember seeing that in the listing, but it plays everything. And are there any things like in-game reset that you have in there, or reset to menu from the game?
Yeah, here's a PAL Super Soccer, so that works.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's similar to the NT Mini in that regard, where you can reset from the controller and go back to the menu.
Gotcha. So, for the very few people that scoffed at the price, which is a little ridiculous to me, that means that what you're getting for under, for it's like 230 with shipping or something, is you're getting something that's as sharp as a modded SNES Mini with an upscaler built in. It's not an upscaler. We'll get into that in a minute. With the audio mod, with the Super CIC mod with in-game reset and everything. So,
Uh-huh.
and if anybody has an issue with the price, or God forbid anybody tries to compare it to those Super Retro Trios or something, they need to keep in mind what exactly it is that they're getting here. And I'm really excited that, although I did absolutely love the analog NT Mini, I always thought those metal designs were like a work of art. But that's something like I hope maybe analog still does that, like a limited edition for people that really want something special. But the fact that it's in a plastic, affordable case, it's absolutely killer. That just means you're gonna open up the amount of people that are getting this to
Yeah.
5 times as many people that would have before. So,
But yeah, I mean, I really like the direction we've gone with the plastic case. I figured this was going to be really big, and it seems to be really big. Everybody's been really happy about it.
yeah, yeah, I was definitely excited. In fact, the only complaints I had about the analog NT Mini was just that there wasn't a cheaper option for people that didn't want the
Yeah.
premium tier, and this solves all that. So that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple on the back. You got your HDMI, and your power is John Carlson says power goes in here and video comes out there. Or something like that. I don't know. I just always found that amusing. But
How do you have it set up for any firmware updates? Is there an SD slot, a USB connector, or anything like that?
there's an SD card slot on the side, just like on the Mini,
Gotcha,
for more updates.
gotcha. Now, I just lost my train of thought. I was a little too excited about this. Sorry. So the video output is HDMI, and on the site it says that it supports 1080p, but is that
Yes.
4x, 5x, or both?
It's unlimited. You can put it any number of X you want between 4 and 5X.
Oh, okay. And when you said unlimited, I'm like, does that mean it
Yeah.
goes to 4K? Because wouldn't that be a massive advertising feature? But
Yeah, but no, you can no. Its slider goes basically between 4X and 5X, so you can have anything in there now.
that's awesome. I can't wait to
And
see the differences between and how everything lines up. And I'm assuming there's scan lines like last time, right?
yeah, I talked to Marshall, the guy that does the
Oh, of
Ultra
course, yeah.
64 or Ultra HDMI,
Hmm.
and he told me the secret for his hybrid scan line, so that's in there now.
Good, good. I like it when us in the retro gaming community takes care of each other and shares.
Yes,
That's always helpful.
that's pretty cool. So I have a thing like that in there. So now the scan lines change size with brightness, like on a CRT kind of.
Hmm. Hmm.
So and then and there's also I have gamma correction now too, because I
Cool.
think that's really important. Playing the CRT and the LCD right next to each other with the same game, it was very obvious that the gamma really needed boosting.
Mm-hmm. You
I mean,
mean
you
with the
could
scan lines on?
no, well, with them on also, but even with them off,
Oh, really?
yeah, the like on Airstrike Patrol on the title screen, it's like a gray. There's a gradient in the background that's a dark gray, and on the flat screen, you can only see like 2 of the 4 levels, and on the CRT, you can see all 4.
Gotcha.
So I boosted the gamma a little bit, so now they look to me exactly the same between the LCD and the CRT.
I was actually just talking to Firebrand X about if there's any way to make a high quality flat screen experience feel a little bit more like a CRT. And we'd taken pictures of our monitors and stuff so that you could zoom in really close and see what the vertical scan lines look like.
Uh huh.
It's really tough because those scan lines change looks with the brightness on the screen. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, it goes into a little more detail than that, but basically, have you ever played with vertical scanline functions or anything like that? Or is there just not enough resolution in 1080p?
Well, there's just really not enough resolution. If you had 4K, it would look, you can make them look a lot more presentable.
Hmm. Hmm.
But in 1080, you're kind of limited.
Which is
Just
really funny that in order to mimic a 1,000 line 20-inch CRT, we probably need 8K.
mhm.
It's funny how you got to go so far forward just to go back.
That, and then with the CRT, you got all sorts of things like blooming. You got secondary emission, and just stuff like that it's hard to reproduce.
Yeah, but the only thing with CRTs, as much as I feel like for everybody that absolutely loves these games and want to experience them the original way and is crazy like me, I actually play a lot of stuff on my flat screen through the open source scan converter. Um,
Uh-huh.
but I still would always keep a CRT around, even if it's a consumer grade. And there's a lot of things I can't stand about CRTs. The geometry is never perfect, and how sometimes if any of the bloom is off, you get that weird like the screen is a wave type of thing.
Uh-huh.
It's hard to describe without showing it on camera, but it is the way that those, I mean, for lack of a better word, vertical scan lines slice through the image. And the way as the characters pass across the screen, that is what really gives it the look of a CRT, in my opinion. So I guess there's something to look forward to in the future for people with 4K upscalers or for the next
Mhm.
generation of stuff. Is it still ridiculously expensive to use a 4K an FPGA that's able to push 4K?
I don't know if there really are any that can do it. I'm sure there are, but there's nothing that ever would be affordable.
Yeah, I mean, like consumer product affordable. I had spoken to
Yeah,
a few people about it for potential upscaler stuff, and they all said, I mean, you're talking $1,000 for a processor then for something
yeah,
that's a hobby product, not even a
yeah.
major manufacturer. So,
And then there's also there's really like on regular HDMI for like 1080, there's driver chips that you can buy that you feed it RGB and all this other stuff, and it'll generate the HDMI. For 4K, I don't think that exists. There's the data rate is a lot higher, so just feeding the data into it would be a lot more difficult. And almost everything that's 4K is all ASIC based.
mhm.
They have a custom chip they make just to do it. So, I mean, I have seen on the market like Analog Devices sells a chip that'll do a 4K upscale, but I mean, who knows how good that is? And it's like the chip alone is like $90. So, once you wrap the memory around it, the board and the A to D or whatever you're doing, it makes it, prohibitively expensive.
Gotcha. So we're probably looking at least another 2 years before that's
Yeah,
something.
probably. Yeah.
Because with the way that the tech swing goes, they probably would announce something that's out in 2018 by now. So yeah, 2 years at least, I would think.
Yeah.
So now the video outputs, so you have your 1080p between 4x and 5x, 720p, 480p. Is that 480p both widescreen and 4:3 or just widescreen?
I'm not sure really. Yeah, I have to go over all that stuff. But it'll be
The only
sim
reason I'm asking is because the lack of analog output, that is something a lot of people, I think, were really hoping to be able to play this on tube TVs,
uh-huh.
including even just like a VGA monitor, because you could pick up really high quality ones for 20, $30
Yeah.
nowadays. And there are those cheap HDMI to VGA converters that don't add any lag or anything, and just convert it straight up. But if it was a 480p widescreen signal, it would still be letterboxed
Uh-huh.
inside a square.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what'll happen if you plug one of those in.
Gotcha. Now, I think the first time I had you on, I had asked you about one-to-one digital output for this exact purpose. In that, with technology always changing and with a mod being done today, what's it 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And when you have direct digital stuff, so like your Nintendo high def NES, obviously your stuff like this. Uh, Analog to digital, you're always going to get noise. I don't care how good the installation is. I don't care how flawless everything is. It's just the realm of analog. But when you go digital to digital, there's always I mean, it's perfect. It's ones and zeros. So is there any chance of the console outputting just the direct original resolution and signal digitally, and then that way people with future processors can just interpret that signal, and 10 years from now when we all have 8K TVs, we'll be able to scale it properly, or is that just not in the
I
cards?
don't know. I mean, it's probably possible. I don't know if I'll have time to add it or inclination to add it. If I got to do other stuff, I only have so much time to work, so
Hmm. Yeah,
you know,
of
I,
course.
I can't add infinite numbers of things, and I have to balance. Well, how many people are going to use this versus how long is it going to take to develop?
Right, right, right. And very often the loudest voice is actually the minority. So the
Uh-huh.
people that you hear bitching and moaning, and sometimes I'm one of them. No, sorry, but sometimes the people that you hear aren't what the majority of people care about. So yeah, it makes sense. But one thing that we did hear last time was the exact clock speeds for speedrunners and stuff like that. What So I guess you have the clock speed settings for this, so people could choose which one they want, correct?
Yeah, well, now I got a frame buffer, so I can do a lot more things.
Hmm.
So I have three modes. I have the zero lag mode, like usual, where the system runs at 60 hertz. Then I have the single frame and full buffered. So those run at the actual SNES speed. So that's like more like a frame meister on a Super Nintendo.
So that was could you explain a little bit more about that? So when you said the no lag 60 hertz version, why would the other ones require a frame buffer if that's the original clock speed?
Because the regular Super Nintendo outputs 60.09 frames a second. It's not quite 60, so it matters.
So you would need the frame buffer to increase that?
No, the frame buffer is there because you have to drop a frame every now and again.
Oh, okay.
Make it 60.
Okay, so the no lag mode is actually the original output.
Yeah, well, no, the no lag mode's my special version of the output that runs at 60 frames a second. The system does,
Okay,
where
gotcha.
it's slightly slowed down. It's just like on the high def or whatever.
And is it when it's running at the actual SNES clock speed? Does that add any lag at all, or is that still about a no lag solution?
Oh no, it adds lag. You got up to 1 frame of lag. Actually, what ends up happening, if you watch it, the lag starts out at 0 and it creeps up to 16 milliseconds, and then it snaps back to 0 when it drops a frame.
Oh, okay, I
That's what
gotcha.
the frame meister is doing that too.
Hmm.
Lag goes up. It's like a ramp because it's getting farther and farther and farther and farther behind, and then when the next frame it skips, it goes bump back down to 0, and then it creeps back up again, and then goes back down. It's like a sawtooth.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes more sense now. Thanks for explaining. And what was the third option then?
Well, that's full buffered mode, and then there's also have a single buffer mode. So you'll see tearing. So
Okay.
you know what I mean. So it'll keep filling the same buffer over and over again. But if you're scrolling left and right, you'll see it tearing go up the screen as as the writing heterodynes with a screen refresh because
Gotcha.
because the HDMI is scanning the buffer out, and Super Nintendo's filling the buffer, and then where they meet, one gets behind the other like this, and that's where the tear line happens.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I figured, speedrunners may want one or the other, so it doesn't cost anything to include both.
Awesome. And no one's going to complain about more options. So that is very cool. So when you say you've been working on this for months now, do you still have your day job?
Oh yeah, I do, but I cut back my hours a bit to work on this.
Oh wow, okay.
So
And
I've
you
been
were
working on this.
cryogenics, right?
Yes, that's right.
So last time you explained you're not freezing people's heads and stuff.
No,
You're for the medical, the other side of the medical
yeah,
labs, right?
medical cell samples, blood, fertility.
Gotcha. Uh, do you is there a crossover in some of the skills that you use between programming these FPGA consoles and doing that? I mean, do you find you know similarities in programming stuff, or is it just two different things?
Well, one of our older controls, it has a Z80 on it and an EEPROM and UARTs and all this. Those parts were getting really expensive, so I redesigned it with an FPGA using my Z80 core that's in the Master System.
That is the coolest thing I've heard in a long time.
So I designed the control back in '97. So then about 4 or 5 years ago, I redesigned it with an FPGA. And so now it's running a Z80 on the FPGA. It's doing the EEPROM on there and all of that. Gotcha. So it made it smaller and cheaper. But, it runs the same firmware exactly. It's bit exact firmware. So it's just like a video game system, only it's a cryogenic control instead.
That's very cool. So then you would just come home and start plugging away at the SNES?
Well, yeah, pretty much my day is I go to work, I come home, have supper, and then I take a nap, and then I get up and work until about 7 in the morning, and I go back to bed.
What time do you go to work?
About 1 p.m.
Oh, okay. So you're on the rotating schedule or something.
Yeah, I get about 3.5 hours at my day job.
So are you one of the crazy people like me and Voltar where this is your hobby, or do you have other hobbies that you try to squeeze in when you're not working like crazy?
Well, I just do a lot of electronics projects. So I make other FPGA devices too. I made I guess it's still video game related. It's a cartridge emulator for about a dozen systems. So that's been really useful for development. So I have an SA1 cartridge for this. So I can plug it in and load ROMs on my emulator and run them on a real system or real SA1 chip too.
And you still have your the music devices that you designed as well, right?
Yeah, I still have those too.
So for anybody that didn't catch the last interview, would you be able to just tell a little bit about those? Because I thought those were fucking awesome.
Well, I made a SPC music player. Well, I made several, but I made an SPC one, which is relevant to this discussion. And it takes SD cards, you load your files on there, and it has an LCD, headphone jack, and a user interface, and you can select games. It's like a little jukebox. It's handheld.
Love it. Awesome. Now, you were the person who wrote the NSF file format, right?
That's correct.
So that NSF player that's in the analog NT Mini, that's pretty neat. I like that you could put it through and actually have it come through with sounding the way it was meant to be heard, I guess, through the FPGA emulation of the actual consoles. So that's a fun little addition to that.
That is very old too.
Yeah, didn't you say it was like from 2000 or 98 or something like that?
Well, no, that NSF player, that was in my original FPGA Nintendo that I did. I started that in 2004. Mm-hmm. So that NSF player was probably 2004 or 2005.
Jeez.
And that's pretty much the exact format it was in. It looked just like that long ago, too. Because, it's actually an NES ROM that runs.
Right. It's just only the music in it, nothing else.
No, I'm talking about the interface, that visualizer. That's a NES program.
Oh, okay.
That shows all the moving stuff.
So when you do all these things, when you start to make some of these FPGA cores, what tools do you use? Do you have anything, any tool secrets you could share with us that isn't top secret or anything like that?
No, there's really nothing special. I just sit down and write it. I do I have a logic analyzer. I've used that for Game Boy, trying to figure out how the LCD works on the Game Boy. That is incredibly difficult. I think the Game Boy video rendering is the most complicated rendering thing I've ever seen.
Really?
Yeah. You wouldn't think so, but the way it's designed is since it has an LCD, it's unlike a CRT. When you're sending video to it, you can't stop sending video to a CRT. You got to keep sending it. On the Game Boy LCD, no, they shut the LCD off. Well, they stopped clocking data into it to fetch sprites. So it's renders the background. Oh, here's a sprite, and it stops sending pixels out, fetches the sprite, and then starts back up again.
Is that why there's so much shimmering and ghosting on that screen?
No, it's just the LCD.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
No, what they do is it loads the data in the LCD, and then they latch the data. So you don't see it actually loading it. You see it latch it, and that shows the line. Mm-hmm. And the lines come in at the same rate. So if they didn't come in at the same rate, some lines would be darker than others. Mm-hmm. So, no, you can't tell this is happening, but this is basically what happens behind in the background. And the other thing that's interesting about it can't, the Game Boy can't scroll side to side with a single pixel like accuracy, but it still does. And the secret is it neglects to clock the display a certain number of times at the start of the line. So if you don't clock the pixels in, it won't display them. Right?
That's kind of an ingenious design, though.
It is. It's very ingenious. Yeah, that's what is so hard. Is, I mean, they did all these little tricks like this, and I mean, the trick is pretty easy. You know, you just don't clock the pixels, and you send them out. You say, okay, I'm just not going to clock in the first pixel. Well, that causes the whole screen to shift over 1 pixel.
Mm-hmm.
You don't clock in 2, then it shifts over 2. So after 7 pixels, what they do is then they clock all of them out, but then the tile changes, so it starts on the next tile. So that gives you the illusion that it's smoothly scrolling.
I mean, imagine being in the room when somebody came up with that.
Yeah, I don't know what drugs they were on, but they were really good stuff.
I was very lucky for many years to be involved in a company where everybody was smarter than me, which I love. I'd rather have it that way than any of the rest. And I've been in rooms before where we all looked at each other and somebody was like, well, why don't you, just not clock the pixels or whatever it was. And the whole room was like, how the fuck did you think of that? That is awesome. Like, and it's just such a, I know I'm nerding out here, but feeling the energy in something like that and having such a unique idea, so lucky that I was so lucky to be a part of that. And I could just imagine how many stories the Nintendo guys have like that.
Yeah, well, it's kind of fun to uncover all the little things they did like that, like on the Game Boy. Since it looks like what they tried to do was make it as simple as possible in hardware, to do the functionality versus like a CRT, so they could stop the clock. So that means they could load the sprite in when they needed it. But so what that allowed them to do is have these sprites, and they only needed one sprite like engine, so to speak, like on the Nintendo for the 8 sprites that you can show on a scan line. You actually have to read all 8 of those sprites in and have 8 identical units that render those sprites all in parallel. On the Game Boy, there's just one unit, and as they need the pixels, they load them in. So as the screen renders, oh, here's a sprite, it stops rendering, fetches the sprite, and then emits the sprite as it draws the screen. And so if another sprite is fetched that's supposed to be on top, it just replaces the pixels that haven't been, clocked out yet and shown. So that's how the sprites can overlap.
In all of my video game research over the past 5 or 6 years since I started the site, I've usually found the opposite. I usually find all the mistakes, and especially on the Sega consoles, but most notoriously the Master System. I still can't even, and by obviously everybody that knows my channel knows I'm not an electrical engineer. I just I just play one on TV. But some of the things trying to trace out some of the weird signal issues for the Master System, even not being an E, I just look at that sometimes and go like, what were they thinking? Were they not actually educated in making board design, or was it like very stereotypical case where everything's done and then somebody needs a change made, and that change causes all these other problems, but whoever's on the top of the chain goes, screw it, send it to manufacturing, which is that's life sometimes, if the EEs of the world had the final say of when things would be released, we'd never have products. All my perfectionist friends would never want anything released if it wasn't some sales guy going, too late, deadline's up, sell it, it's fine.
So. I mean, that sometimes that happens. So, like on this project, I had to try and get everything done as fast as I could with the accuracy I could get. So I'm really happy with it, I think, for the amount of time I had to work on it. Mm-hmm. I mean, everything runs. I have not, after debugging, I haven't found anything that doesn't run. So I think my accuracy is very good. Oh, I even tried a Dr. SF6, disk-based copier thing. That even works.
So I think these were the things that I used to read about in magazines as kids, but never actually used. Was that where you could back up a game to a floppy drive?
Yes.
That works.
That stupid thing works, yeah.
What was that thing that you were talking about before? The thing that you held up to the camera that I'd never heard of either. That super.
Oh, the Sufami Turbo.
What is that?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, people call it, they say it's like an Aladdin for the Super Nintendo, like the Aladdin on the Nintendo.
Right, right.
The idea is you could buy these small carts and they were supposed to be cheaper.
Hmm.
And then they plug into the system. And there's 2 ports on here. I did some research. And this is mainly so you could copy save games back and forth. And you could also, on one of the games, there's like a series, you could plug a second cartridge in. It was kind of like the lock-on cartridge for
Sonic 3.
Yeah.
Sonic and Knuckles. Neat.
It was very similar to that, apparently.
I'm assuming that's Japan only.
Yes.
Like so many of the other neat gadgets that we didn't get over here.
Yeah. So yeah, this works great. It's funny, if you put the cartridge over here, it'll actually complain and tell you, it has a little graphic that says like, take it out of here and put it into here.
That's cool. Hey, at least it's smart enough to do that. So
yeah, I thought that's hilarious. I mean, how do I know what side it's supposed to go in? They're marked A and B. I guess you put it in A, so I don't know. But that's just how it works. So yeah, everything I can stuff in that cart slot works. I have one of those Nokia Game Saver Pluses, and that works. Have you ever seen that thing?
I've seen pictures. I've never seen it in person.
Oh. But yeah, it plugs in. You plug your cartridge into the back of it, and then you can save the game state and reload it.
Yeah, I saw that at Retro Games Plus, the game store where I used to live, and I almost bought it, and then when I went back, it was gone. But I always wanted to play with that. I assume it's buggy, because save states are really hard. Are there save states implemented in
No,
this?
there's no save states.
To do that right is a ridiculous amount of work.
Well, and even if I could do it, save states wouldn't work for like games with expansion chips.
Right, gotcha. So do you want to chime in at all? And I know this is something we could probably talk about for a while, so I guess just give your overall opinion. There's always an ongoing debate, and some are just trolls looking to pick a fight, but there's a lot of people that have genuine opinions on both sides on, is FPGA emulation? And I certainly have my thoughts, but I kind of want to hear what you have to say about that.
No, I don't really think it's emulation. Emulation to me means, you could debate all day long the exact definition of emulation and all that. I don't really think it is emulation. Mm-hmm. Emulation to me is a CPU of some kind executing code that emulates a system. Like a PC emulator.
That's always in my brain what that was too. You have a piece of software running on a software layer, running on an operating system, run through your CPU bus and all that memory and all that stuff.
Yeah, and it's almost always done on a general purpose computer. Like your PC or a phone or a tablet or whatever. It's not usually done on purpose built hardware.
Right.
See, this is purpose built hardware for Super Nintendo, in this case.
Right. So, the troll arguments aside, the ones that, if it's not in the plastic of a Super Nintendo, it's not a Super Nintendo. If Nintendo didn't design it, it's not real. Forget about those trolls. My interpretation of this is always, excuse the layman's terms here, but software emulation is code running on software layers running through a general purpose machine. And FPGA emulation, if you will, is one chip that's designed to mimic other chips as exact as possible. Is that a decent enough explanation?
Yeah, well, what I write, I don't write software. I write, a hardware definition language. I write in Verilog. It's a hardware definition language. That's what they call it, an HDL. Mm-hmm. So when I write my code, it's actually not, it's defining registers, flip-flops, and logic gates is what it's doing. It's a text representation of a schematic.
Gotcha.
That's the way I look at it.
Okay. That's a better way to describe it than I've been. So thank you for that. And I also, made the basic layman's conclusion that FPGA design, much like anything else that's written, all depends on how good it's written, and for lack of better terms,
of course, so. Yeah. Just because it's on an FPGA doesn't make it magic, perfect. Mm-hmm. It's all the work I go through, for my testing and development. Everything I've done so far, like on the PPU, for example, since I had the real PPU running in parallel with my FPGA version, I could do a direct comparison of all the outputs as it ran. So that's how I know, say, my mode 7 is exactly the same, is because I did mode 7, and then I can watch the fetching from VRAM, so I know I'm fetching the exact same pixels on both.
Right. And I've seen FPGA cores that were unfinished, so I'm not picking on the developers, but I've seen FPGA cores that were unfinished where, I'd rather play on a software emulator. And like I said, I'm certainly not shitting on those developers. It was unfinished, and they were nice enough to send it over just for me to mess with. But so, I've definitely seen both. I've seen the analog NT Mini where, man, I put that thing through its paces. I mean, hours of stupid comparison shots and all the crap that I usually do, and it's spot on. And like I said, I've seen the ones that aren't. So I definitely could see the difference, I guess, with those. And for me personally, even with my crazy OCD, if I sit down and play a game and there's no lag and it feels the same and it has the same controller, that is something that the shape and the buttons do. That's the way that game was designed to be played.
Yeah.
But as long as all those fall into place, I mean, as long as it's the same experience, then that's more than good enough for me. So I genuinely don't understand where some of the trolls are going with that. But yeah, I mean, if it's done well and the attention to detail that you put into your stuff is pretty awesome. So it's kind of like that for everybody, though. It's kind of like playing the Super NT, or I guess the better description would be the analog NT Mini with NES cartridges versus like the Retron HD. There are many people out there where that super cheap and affordable Retron console that outputs HDMI is fine for them. They don't care about the difference. It plays fine, and that's totally cool. But those of you who want the quality and want the proper experience, go to the better product. It's the same with music too.
Yeah.
I've listened to people's albums. I've even listened to professional albums where as I'm listening, I'm like, there's a punch in, there's a cut. Nope, they dubbed the voice wrong. You can hear where and it drives me crazy because I love music. So it's, when I hear something that's great, I always could tell the difference. So maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm on the spectrum or something. But fuck it, I'll take it. I enjoy life like this.
Well, that's the thing. When I make my cores, I want to make them as good as I can make them. Because I look at competition. I don't really think I'm in competition with anybody, but just to use lack of a better term, I look at what other people have written, and I don't know why that no one can really finish anything. It seems, at least on some systems. I mean, there's a good Amiga core, I believe, Atari ST, and I mean, there's some better stuff. But say 10 years ago, there was nothing.
But I kind of find that everywhere in life. When I was a kid, I loved drag racing cars, totally legal, totally. And, all the time, people have, there are the barstool racers. They have a car they're going to buy. Oh, they bought the car, they're still working on it. Oh, they're totally going to be down at the track at the end of the week. And it's just, it never materializes. And it's every hobby I've ever had. There's just, when the last band I was in, the first gig we played, we met a bunch of very fun-loving, beer-drinking guys. Oh, we're working on an album and a video. Oh, so are we. 6 months later, I had that, and now they are pissed at me because I have it and they don't. Well, if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. I feel like that's got to be a massive part of that. Unless people are, unless that's their day job, a lot of people let projects that are hard fall at the wayside because it's just, don't like to do things that are hard. So.
Well, that's why I noticed I can't remember who it was. I was reading one on the forums. This guy released a lot of cores for, I think, the FPGA arcade board or something. I'm not ragging on him or anything, but he's like, oh, well, I made a Game Boy core. I had to fix all the bugs in the open source, Z80 core that had a Game Boy extension and blah, blah, blah. So he did that. He got some games running, but then he just gave up when it got hard. There's no sound because, he didn't want to do sound. And, there was, sprite bugs and all these bugs. It's like, oh, yeah, some games work. Okay, that's enough for me. I'll just move on to, something else.
Yeah, well, you just hit the nail on the head. People give up when it gets hard. And
then... It got hard. So, it took me 3 times to get that Game Boy to work right. The video.
Geez, about how many hours do you think that equates to?
It was a lot. It was hard. Like I said, I think that Game Boy Video is like one of the hardest things I've ever done. I mean, it seems stupid. How hard could it be? Well, it was really hard.
It's funny to talk to people who go the distance with things, and they all have the same mentality. Like, I interviewed Mike Matei a while back, and I was joking that he's very obviously better at games than me, and he was kind of like, no, not at all. The difference is when a game gets hard, I don't give up. I keep playing until I beat it, and put that video online. And I
Yeah.
loved that. It was such a cool, nerd motivational talk that he gave. But it's, yeah, not just finishing what you started and trying to do your best is it's a rare quality these days. That's why I'm so appreciative of actually a lot of the people that have been helping out the past couple of years in the retro gaming scene to punch through some of these problems that we've been having. So
Yeah, I mean, like on the Super Nintendo, I was working, well, with my day job, probably at least 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, this whole year.
yeah, it's frustrating. You start to life kind of blinks by, and you start to miss a few things. It's frustrating sometimes, but
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it was worth it. I mean, it looks like the response has been awesome. I've been really happy reading all the comments and things. There's people trolling about everything. They always do.
you could give everybody on the planet $1 million, and somebody's going to troll you. So it's
Oh no, I don't care. It doesn't bother me. I just find it interesting. Some of the things people complain about, even on the NT Mini, things people were complaining about, I thought were interesting. So the biggest
yeah.
complaint I think is people are saying, "Oh, well, this doesn't have analog out." And it's like, yeah, well, just get a regular, one in RGB modded, like a
Yeah.
top, or like
So
a junior or something.
that's kind of my opinion on this. And, I know not everybody can solder, but that's why I like to use myself as an example, because I am not good at it. Everybody that's seen my work, it looks great, but I work hard to get it. But that's not a natural talent of mine. And
Oh
even
yeah.
somebody like me can take a SNES Mini, put one of Voltar's boards in it, and I'm sure if I stopped soldering for like a year, it'd probably take 2 hours to do that project. I could do it in like 10 minutes now, but it's doable. And now you have perfect analog output. Grab a good shielded cable that, the what, $25 board or something, and you have everything that you could ask for right there, perfect analog. So the opposite of that, the NES, that's, you get what you pay for. It's a good board, but it's an expensive board, and it's a
Hmm.
really hard install because you have to desolder the chip. And if you don't have the right tools, which are expensive,
It's
then you,
impossible, just about.
right. I mean, I tried desoldering like a 7805, one of the little voltage regulators, with one of those pump things,
Oh,
and that took like a half hour. I finally
oh,
got a knockoff Hako 808, and that's literally bzz, 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 done, like 10 seconds.
well, on the 7805, it's really easy. You just put the iron across all three pins and pull it out.
Beginner, beginner. That's a trick. That's a trick that I know now, but I didn't know then. And it's in order to get and all the other cores, a ColecoVision, you need a scope in order to actually do a proper RGB output for that because of the
Uh-huh.
wide swing of tolerances and the master system. I still haven't cracked, and people way smarter than me haven't cracked getting all of the jail bars out of a master system.
I don't
So
think you may not be able to.
I actually,
That's
after
the
all
thing.
I've seen, I don't think you can. But and it. So my point is the SNES not having an analog output or the SNES NT doesn't matter. You could
Yeah,
very
it doesn't matter.
affordably
Yeah, I
and
don't think
very easily get the analog side of it. Whereas all of those other consoles, having analog output was a necessity because it solved a lot of issues that it had.
Mhm.
So
It was just simply a cost issue here. To hit our target cost, we had to cut analog pretty much.
yeah, and a lot of people that are users, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but I myself am a huge user of stuff, but that are only users don't see the steps and the dominoes fall. So they see something like, well, a VGA connector is like a dollar, and the extra chips is like $4, but they don't see the implementation, they don't see the testing, they don't see the support afterwards. A lot of people don't even realize how much it costs to answer support emails.
Oh yeah.
So it's and I probably wouldn't have either. I probably should have said that first. I wouldn't have noticed those things either if I didn't work in a company that made hardware for things. So when you say to reduce cost, it's not just the cost of the unit, it's the cost of everything you have to do afterwards and everything you've done before.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of costs. Like even just on the hardware, you got the circuit board, you got maybe you have to have a bigger chip, you got to have the DACs, and you got to have the sockets or the plugs or the jacks or whatever. And you may need a different power supply on there to run just that part too. So that's more hardware. And then you got to write in my case, the Verilog to support it. So I mean, there's a lot of hidden costs in there and time.
And debugging analog interference. So I know nothing about Verilog, so I can't speak to that, but I do know when you lay out a board, and guys like Renee from DB Electronics, he knows as good as anybody. It's anything audio or video. You have a great layout, everything's spaced out perfectly. You have the board made, you put all the components in. Hey, I'm getting a buzzing on the audio. Hey, what's the weird thing on the video about? You go back, you triple check everything, it's fine, it's perfect. And then you have to realize, like, oh, I guess this must be radiating across, and that must be coupling with, and digital has its huge challenges, but it's totally different than analog. And there's a lot of stuff on analog that you can't even debug until you have like a final working board revision.
Well, I don't know about that. I lay out analog all the time, and I don't have these issues. You just have to have a good layout. Well, look at the NT Mini and the Super here. The Super's got analog, the analog in from the cartridge. And the power supplies are analog. Even though they're switching supplies or whatever, they're still analog. And all the power routing is very important. So I don't know, I can't really describe it. I just have a feel for it. So I know when I lay out something analog, it's going to work and not have, interference and stuff.
Yeah, but that's more of a reflection on your talents than it is on analog. And, I'm not just saying that because you're the one being interviewed. Everybody has their thing. Dave Mustaine could pick up a guitar and make 4 notes sound vicious and angry. That's his talent. So, but yeah, that's a good point.
It's really not that hard. I mean, there's just some basic like guidelines I just go through when I lay it out, I guess. You don't want anything digital anywhere near your analog. You got to have your grounding right. Don't break up your ground planes. For God's sake, don't use a 2-layer board if you can help it.
Make sure everything runs at the proper voltage.
Well, yeah. But, where does the noise come in? Well, the noise comes in from digital signals, so keep them away. It comes in on the power, so filter your power and make sure your supplies aren't noisy, and you'll have a good time of it. And make sure you don't have ground loops.
I was just about to say ground loops in audio are the bane of every musician.
Yeah, don't put digital here, and analog in the middle, because what's going to happen, those ground currents are going to flow straight across and get right in your analog.
What's actually funny is I had a very high-end amp that I've been wanting my whole life, and I finally bought the newer revision of it, and no matter what, if you put it in the most distorted channel, even if you have everything unplugged, so the amp is just on, there was a loud hum. And one of my friends said, oh yeah, I just replaced 2 of these things. I've done it before on other amps. So I'm looking into it, and something told me. I was like, oh, it doesn't sound right. So I brought it, and it was a manufacturer defect, and that's exactly what they did. It was a ground loop. Excuse me. So they ended up replacing it for free, which is pretty killer, and that's not something that happens very often anymore, especially for something that's almost $2,000. But yeah, it's I don't know. Maybe it's just my history with guitars and music stuff, but analog audio has always just been such a headache.
I just don't have a problem with it. I mean, it just, just follow some basic layout guidelines. I see lots and lots of really bad board layouts on that OSH Park. I love looking through all the, you can see all the designs people have submitted, if they have it open. Mm-hmm. It's interesting to go through those boards to see. It's like, okay, this is a really awesome board. This guy knows what he's doing. Okay, this person, they're kind of median, and this person doesn't know what the hell they're doing. I
Yeah,
mean, not
my only
bad.
problem with that is a lot of these guys on the forums and a lot of these guys, when you talk to them, will say things like, hey, this is only like my second board, so I'm just going to put it up here, but, be careful with it and, improve it if you will. But that info isn't on the page where you could actually get the board.
True. Yeah.
So that you end up, a lot of people end up getting boards that are, I guess the best way to put them is they're not finished.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
and have to deal with that. So I wish there was a better way for people to flag it. And of course, there are always the guys that think they're awesome at everything and then just post a crappy board. But.
Well, on IRC, I've helped a lot of people with their board layouts. Like someone will send me, "Oh, here's my board layout. Look at it," and I'll say, "Oh, yeah, fix this, 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 and this," and then they relay it out. And I was like, "Okay, that looks a lot better now. So you should have a lot better." I was like, "Okay, if you move this and this, then you don't need these 20 vias, you know."
Right.
So I don't know. I've just been doing it so long, I guess, that it's just not a problem now. I don't know.
Yeah,
You
you
know,
were
I
probably doing it before auto route, before you
I
could
don't
just press
use,
that
I
button.
do not use auto. Do not use auto route. Don't use it. It's horrible.
It's funny because, like I said, I don't do board design. I'm not an EE, but I've actually been able to tell now when some of the beginners, and like I said, especially the guys that are honest and open about it, will
Well, they
send
say, "Oh, auto route. That's what I want to use." I mean, how are they supposed to know? You know?
right, and they send me the board, and I'll look at it and I'll go, I'm not an expert, but I'm pretty sure that's auto route because you wouldn't do that. You'd want it over, and so.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. You know, auto routing is a very difficult thing. It's never going to be very good. There's one good use of auto route. If you got 20 VGAs on a 20-layer board, then you use auto route. You know. But I mean,
Yeah.
auto routing, I guess, can be okay, but you need really expensive tools and you have to write lots of rules and all that. And, for stuff like this, it's just not worth it. I lay out those BGAs, by hand. It's really not that hard. It doesn't really take that long. And, everything is all very direct. I don't know if you ever look at the routing on like the NT Mini, everything is all just perfect. Everything just radiates out from that FPGA. There's no crossing, no vias, no nothing.
Yeah, it's the first thing I noticed when I took that thing apart was just it looked like the perfect spider web of things going. There wasn't anything crossing, so that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. So that Super NT's, same type of thing. The FPGA is a lot bigger too.
Hmm.
So there's a much bigger part in there now. So there's twice as much FPGA in there as in the NT Mini.
So, are you still working at all on the Zimba 3000, or has that just become like a backseat project for you?
Well, it's a back burner project. I don't get paid for it, so I got to eat.
Yeah, fair enough. um, is that something that's just still you're working on here and there, and we'll have it down the line, or are you just kind of like, well, all my work's already been implemented in this, so.
I don't know. It's just one of those things. The option is open to do it, but honestly, I don't know if people will pay for it. I have no way of making it cheap enough compared to like an NT Mini or a Super NT.
So I'm not trying to sound like a know-it-all, but I'm pretty sure I could answer that question. There is a small group of people that not only would they pay for it, they'll pay for it now and expect it in 2019. But I don't know if that's a volume that would justify the time and would pay you enough to be able to pull that off. That's the issue.
That's the thing. I just don't know about the payback. I mean, I can do it. Can I do it? Sure. Is it going to be worth my time to do it? I'm not sure at this point. Yeah, I mean, I got all these cores and all this stuff, but I mean, I can get them running on a Zimba 3000. But I mean, is it really worth it to the user? Right? Will they pay however much it costs? I don't know how much it would be, but then I still have to make some kind of enclosure. I don't have an injection molding machine in my garage, so it'd be made out of, say, laser cut, polycarbonate or something.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I do have one of those that works. So.
Are you still playing around with other cores for the analog NT Mini whenever you have free time? I know that you were still working on.
Well, I haven't had any free time, but I plan on finishing the port of that Intellivision, in the next couple months. I want to get that out of there. So.
Are you still planning on selling controller adapters for the NT Mini, controller and cartridge adapters?
Well, I got those. I was thinking Jason from Game Tech, he may want to sell those.
I'm sure he would want to get involved in that because that's something that once again, it might just be the core followers that love this stuff, and not just the person who wanted the piece of art that they could play their
Oh
Nintendo
yeah,
on.
yeah.
But that is definitely something that I feel like would justify the cost because you're not talking about a lot of cost versus what it would be to make a console. So, but yeah, the one thing I was personally most excited for was the SMS with the 3D glasses port because I love those games. I don't know why. There's Maze Hunter is amazing and Missile Defense 3D. It's a game that I
Uh-huh.
just love to play for 10 minutes. Just shoot shit in 80s 3D.
Oh yeah, I think I forgot to put that on there. I can always add it, but yeah, the cartridge adapters, those are really easy to make. It's just a pin converter, so. But the hard part about cartridge adapters is the physical part. The electronics is easy. It's always the packaging is a pain.
Yeah, that's
So
why a lot of people just sell PCB only for stuff like that.
yeah. Well,
Is there? Mhm.
what I was thinking of selling was like the board and then two pieces of plexiglass that go on either side of the board to make it like a cartridge shape so you can plug it in.
That's literally exactly what I was about to say. Is there a way to just get two pieces of plexi that you could bolt on and just have it go down to protect it?
Yeah. Yeah, if you look at the board, there's holes specifically for that purpose.
Oh, cool. Well, man, this is awesome. Is there anything? Is there anything I forgot to ask that you wanted to mention about all this stuff? It's coming out in February. You could pre-order it now. Ton of
Hmm.
different colors. I got the clear one because I'm a nerd and I want to see what's inside.
Yeah, I think the clear one's my favorite one too.
Awesome. I don't know anything else. I guess.
Well, not really. I did add some what I call quality of life features. So, like there's a thing called pseudo high res mode that the Super Nintendo does. So, have you ever played the game Jurassic Park? It has like this overlay,
Yeah.
and it like looks like lines. If you use like RGB or an emulator, it's like broken up into lines, vertical lines.
Hmm.
And so what I do, I have a blending mode that will get rid of the lines and blend it so it's like a transparent effect.
So it's
So
kind of like the waterfall in Sonic the Hedgehog on composite versus RGB.
kind of, I have a you can probably include it in the video. I'll put it in the Skype window. Um, what it looks like. I have an example of what it looks like before and after the blending effect.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm leaving a note. I'll definitely put that in for people to look at. Do you know? Do you have another project queued up, or are you basically just looking forward to being able to take a deep breath?
Well, I still got work to do, so there's still plenty. I gotta, all the little loose ends and things. But the Super Nintendo itself is fully done and fully operational. Everything works. I've played the hell out of all sorts of games on it. I'd love to show it off. I can't show it off, unfortunately, yet, but
No, it's understandable. So
yeah, it won't be very long. I'll probably be able to show it off. I mean, there'll be other things too, but I have 83 gigs of video I've taken during the whole entire development process.
oh, that's awesome. So you're gonna release them in like little chunks on your YouTube channel?
Yeah, yeah, probably sometime next year after it ships. But yeah, I mean, I show everything basically the whole process of how I reverse engineered it and all the way through production of the final prototype and then into the production model that we got now.
Jeez, I absolutely love stuff like that. So I'll make sure to put a link to your YouTube channel down below, and everybody subscribe so that and it pops up in their feed when you get to upload those.
So, but yeah, I'm really excited to release that because I've never actually done that for anything.
Hmm.
It's mainly like, okay, here it is, but there's no backstory of how it got there.
Yeah, I think that's I don't know. I feel like that's definitely something that a lot more people than you would expect would be very interested to watch. I think there's a lot of people that are fans of your work that would appreciate that. So I'm glad that you're able to post it.
But this is the first time I've done this direct chip comparison, methodology for reverse engineering, and it I think it sped development up 3 or 4 times.
Oh wow. Huh.
It would have been Otherwise, I'd have to write test ROMs, hook up a logic analyzer. That J.W. Donnell guy, the Verisnest guy, that's
Yeah.
what he did. He hooked logic analyzers up to a Super Nintendo and made test ROMs and ran things. And he claims to have 90 gigabytes of trace logs or something. So, but the thing is, I didn't need any of that because I was doing the direct comparison. So I didn't really need test ROMs. I had a couple test ROMs, but they were timing test ROMs. Then I have like a PPU debugger. It's a big screen with all the registers, and you can poke the registers, upload graphics. Then I could display it on the CRT and the HDMI and do a direct compare, modify things and make sure it works perfectly in both places. Check the addresses and all that. That's how I knew everything was right. I kind of took development and turned it around and went bottom up, one chip at a time versus top down system, down to the lower level. And I think that's what really, sets us apart.
Well, hopefully, I've been talking to a lot of people over the past few years that are younger and looking to get into this and have the drive, and they're certainly gaining the knowledge to do it eventually. So hopefully the younger generation of people that are jumping into this will use that as maybe a jumping off point on where to learn and to get their own tricks. So it's awesome that you're sharing that.
Yeah. So basically, you only have to succeed once. So, there's thousands and thousands of failures, but when it succeeds, then you've got it, and that's what it takes. I fail hundreds or thousands of times during development, but that's why it's called development.
Did you make that up, or did you steal that from somebody?
No, I made that up. Yeah, yeah. 'Cause that's how it works. That's what development is. Most of the time it's just spent where it doesn't work and you got to fix it, or that's failing somehow and you got to fix it.
You only got to succeed once. Well, I'm going to steal that from you, but I'll quote you if I ever see it.
Yeah, you just got to get it to the point where it works once, and so all those failures don't matter because that's just development.
That's awesome. Well, we have to end on that because that's okay. One of the best sayings I've heard in a long time. So thank you so much for your time. I'll leave all the links to where to look at your channel down below. Thank you again for coming on, and I definitely hope to do this again.
Yeah, it was fun. So I don't know, maybe again after the launch, maybe, or in February or whatever.
Yeah, that would be awesome if you wouldn't mind. So here's the teaser for the next Kevin interview, guys.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks again for your time.
Mm-hmm.